Oh, hello, and I'm spilling water everywhere. Sorry about that. Hello, everybody. I am Breadbeard of Soft Boy Social Club. If you don't know, you probably do because you're on my channel right now. And I have an echo. Let's turn that off. So today we are going to be talking with Spencer Sunshine. Spencer Sunshine has been an activist for 30 years, starting his own anti-racist action group in Atlanta, Georgia. And for the past 15 years, he has been researching, studying, and publishing information about the alt-right and different white nationalist organizations and tactics. And we are here to talk to him today about his new book, 40 Ways to Fight Fascist Street Legal Tactics for Community Activists. Sorry, I forgot that last part. It's a mouthful. So I'm going to look in the chat, see if we got some more people coming in real quick. We got only about 10 people on YouTube. Folks, share this. This is important things. These are important people we're talking to, and it's important information that a lot of you need, that a lot of I need, to be honest. Well, we got about 10 in YouTube. What are we looking like on the Twitch? I'm going to be honest. I don't know how to find it on Twitch because I really use this. Oh, well, anyways. Tell you what, we will go ahead and bring on the amazing, the illustrious, the important Spencer Sunshine. that was my stump speech.
I know it's the best introduction I think I've ever
had. Thank you for coming on with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So could maybe better than what I can do and what I have already done. Could you tell us a little bit about your background, your intro into activism, and what you've been doing, for your academic career?
Yeah, it's a funny sort of what I'm doing now is a return to stuff that I was my first sort of entry into political work. I was a young teenager in the late 80s when and I was involved in the punk rock scene. And 1988 was sort of the year of the big Nazi skinhead explosion in the United States. I grew up in a small town. There were frequent Klan rallies there. Our like state representative was a member. He's the president of the John Birch Society. Sorry, the representative to the U.S. Congress. So it's an extremely conservative area, and I ended up going to high school with Nazi skinheads, and they were sort of the dominant the only organized political force in the Atlanta punk rock scene. And this was a time when maybe 1,000 people would go to a show. It was before Nirvana and the bands got signed. So like 1,000 people would show up to this underground show, and there'd be 50 or 100 skinheads in the middle of the pit, like intimidating everybody. There were probably a dozen neo-Nazi groups in the area. So I ended up meeting up with some adults, now younger than me, which is kind of awful for them, because they were like, I looked up to them as older adults who were involved in. They had a counter-Klan, counter-Nazi organizing group called the Neighbors Network, and we ended up working with them. And I and some others founded a youth group, an anti-racist. I mean, it's like ARA, basically an anti-fascist youth group in the punk scene. And then through that, got into radical politics of different kinds. As you do, you wander through different projects and tendencies. And around 2005, I got interested in doing some of this work again through two separate issues. One, a sort of disappointing amount of anti-Semitism that had sort of floated into the anarchist scene in the post-Seattle era through a lot of anti-imperialist politics. But the other was through finding a crypto-fascist group called National Anarchists who are cross-recruiting from anarchists. And trying to get people to push them out because they were being tolerated. An editor of Green Anarchy magazine, of the Eugene magazine that John Zerzan used to be an editor at, had actually gone over to them, So I wrote an article about this, and then I was just like, what is all this weird stuff? Who is Evola and Otto Strasser, and who are these weird people, and how do they come to a position that shares some things in common with us? Especially if you're into radical ecology or critiques of technology and stuff. So I started exploring them and writing about that. And if you look at left-right crossover movements long enough, you realize that what you're really studying is right-wing movements and about how they're pushing into left-wing movements. There's a long history of this. And then sort of got started studying right-wing movements proper more. I was a fellow at a think tank called Political Research Associates from 2013 to 2019 after I finished my PhD. I didn't want to teach. I wanted to be a little bit more in the world with these ideas. And, ended up at a bunch of kind of hair-raising events. I went to the Bundy family's takeover of the Malheur Refuge in Oregon in early 2016. I published a book-length report about that called Up in Arms, A Guide to Oregon's Patriot Movement. Then later I was at Charlottesville. That was a bit stressful. Afterwards, it became very popular on 4chan. So after that, we published this guide in 2018. It got reissued. There were some problems with it. We wanted to change the language in 2020 with PopMob called, I love alliteration, so called 40 Ways to Fight Fascists, Street Legal Tactics for Community Activists. It's I'll show you, these are the nice printed copies that Eberhard Press did in Portland. It explains 40 different tactics that people can use to do legal counter-organizing against fascist and mostly violent far-right groups. It works best with the violent groups, even if they're not. And then all kinds of white nationalists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I will, for everyone in the chat or everyone watching afterwards, you can look in the description and you can find links to that PDF for free. The illustrious Mr. Sunshine is not charging you one bit. So please, I'll even put I think this is the online version in the chat. You can find an online version, you can find a printable version, and you even made a 2-page, like a condensed flyer for easily handing out, which I think is really good.
Yeah, if you want to hand it, that's for handing out like a demos or stuff where you're just, everyone might not want the whole thing, but so they know it's there.
Yeah. And so going back to when you were talking about how like, you just kind of started doing one thing and then another thing happened that kind of led you into activism. That's one of the first, I don't have the PDF in front of me. I think the first section you talk about is, can you talk a little bit about how like some ways to get active, to get involved? Because I've had a lot of people ask me that before, is like, well, how do you like, is there an official meetup where is there a training center, but how do people like start to get involved in a trustworthy way to actually start, being a part of these groups and becoming active?
Yeah, a lot of people are really interested in getting involved right now, but don't know how to. I think that's why there's so much interest in this guide. You don't, I mean, if you already know people, unfortunately at this point in the game, you probably have to know people already and have a relationship with them to trust you and work with you. If you're coming in from the cold, you don't have any activist background, and you don't know them personally, it's going to be a little difficult. But you don't need that. You can go ahead, and a lot of people learn on their own. There's no rules about this. These are 40 suggestions. They're not rules. Life doesn't have there's not there are guidelines, but not things that you have to do with this work. So yeah, I mean, the first thing you really do is just learn about the far right, get a little bit of an idea about it. You should read some background texts, understand it's a complicated political movement, just like the left is. Just like in the left, there's different ideologies, there's different organizations, there's different personalities. Some of them get along with each other, some of them don't. Some of them historically don't get along, but in certain moments do. They use certain kinds of tactics. They have certain strategies. They move fairly slowly. These things move fairly slowly, so you can learn about them and see them, playing out in the world. Find some other people to do this work with. This work is a lot of work. The amount of information you collect is a lot. You need to share it with people. So find some other people, 2 to 5 people to go do this work with. They also don't need to have a background in doing stuff. And then start to look at what's going on around you in your community. Look at the far right activism in your community and start to identify it and document it. That's basically how you get started. Anybody can do it on their own.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you talk about some different ways in your book. Learn about, number one, learn about far right movements. So yeah. What about finding collaborators? What would you say about where to go looking for? I want to step that back slightly. I'm trying to be careful about how to say this because I don't want anyone to go specifically like seeking out. I please. I think Spencer, you would agree. Don't do any type of adventurism. It's not a life experience. You know, it's important. It's work and it's important actions being done. But what would you say about what would you recommend for trying to go find these places? Just kind of like look on Twitter. That seems like an iffy way. Just look on Twitter or like Facebook for your local anti-fascist group and just ask to join in. Barring that, like, what would you say is a way to go find some collaborators?
Well, I would go look at people you already know and you already work with in whatever way. A lot of this work's actually really boring. There's a lot of media stuff about the big confrontations. Well, most of these confrontations happen in Portland, Oregon right now. And you want to try to avoid them if you can. I mean, you want to remain anonymous if you can. If there's a necessity to have a counter demonstration, you should organize it. But if you don't, like 95% of this work is really behind the scenes, and it's a lot of work. It's just worky work. So find people who will do work. Don't find people who like to run their mouth off and make speeches, but won't put the elbow grease in and do stuff. Look with people you already know who want to get involved. Go through your friend networks. Find people who are already, competent organizers in whatever way. It might not be in politics. It might be in their social group. Who's always putting together group outings, or who's involved in, if you're involved in a religious group or other group, who's always the organizer of it or the secretary, or, and find, you're going to want a couple people who are real tight that way. And then some other people, some adventurous people are good for scouting and collecting stuff. There's a little more edgy stuff, but yeah, don't grab any people who go off half-cocked. This is going to hurt you and not help you. So I'd look to the pools of people you already know. And in fact, don't tell people you're starting this work. Your best defense, because there is an amount of risk in this. It's not as high as people think, but there is a true amount of risk. You want to stay as anonymous as possible. So contact people you already have some kind of relationship with. If you're on Twitter, and if you're on Twitter a long time, you cultivate certain relationships with people. If you have an existing relationship, you could ask them. I wouldn't go out and ask new people who you don't have a relationship with, because you don't know if you're going to get government agents. You don't know if you're going to get fascist honeypots. You don't know if you're going to get loose cannons. So
I found a plethora of fascist honeypots on Twitter that I had to blast out. That were there was one that was even saying like, Richard Spencer backs Biden, so he's actually okay now, and it's like that's a way to tell you.
I mean, if you have a lot of time, you might want to. Yeah, people are saying look in other groups. If you're, that was for if you don't have any, if you're not actually involved in political activism already. If you are, go around to the people you work with and see who'd be interested in doing this work. The IWW already does some of this work with the General Defense Committees. You have a lot of time, you could start a group, and one of the handy things, the communists used to do this, and I really like the strategy, of starting book clubs. And then once you get to know people in the book clubs, I think activists need to read a little bit more, frankly. It's always good. Once you kind of get to know people in these book clubs, and then you suss their politics and stuff out, and you can use them as recruiting tools. So you may wish to just start putting events on and see who you meet through these events and who will do work. You need to find at least 2 people who are going to, you need at least 3 people who are going to do a lot of work. And then you can have 3 other people who will help out. That's a sort of ideal group of people to get together.
Well, and the added benefit of starting a book club and recruiting and finding people is they've read some theory at least, so you're already off on a good foot.
There's going to be a lot of reading, you know, it might be internet reading, but there's going to be a lot of reading involved in this. So, and listening to long, boring videos by people who have crackpot ideas.
Well, as someone with long, boring videos with crackpot ideas, there are some good ones out there that are not boring. They may be still pretty crackpot. You probably won't find them on my channel though. Something that I knew about, but I guess I'd never really thought much about that you bring up at the beginning in the foreword, I guess you would call it, of the zine, is people tend to think about the alt-right or white nationalism as a monolithic, cohesive group, and that's not really the case. There are different factions and such. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, you think anarchists don't like each other? Like Nazis really, like they're on another level of arguing with each other. They're constantly fighting with each other. I mean, we saw this trial that just happened in New Hampshire with Chris Cantwell, the crying Nazi from Charlottesville. He is convicted of threatening another Nazi, another like extremist pro-terrorism Nazi who testified against him. So these guys will turn on each other. They have all kinds of different factions. They generally have, there's not, and you can think of them as resting subsets of each other, like the Russian dolls that are one or inside of the other. Like at the core are full neo-Nazis, right? Then there is a greater pool of fascists who might not identify as Nazis. You know, Richard Spencer, you know, I think is a fascist, but not necessarily a Nazi. You know, there are, you know, Mussolini, a fascist and not a Nazi. Then there's a bigger pool of white nationalists, people who believe in white supremacy, but maybe don't identify with fascism. The Ku Klux Klan, of course, was founded in 1865, long before the fascist movement. Sometimes these people aren't so interested in the anti-Semitism, or sometimes, you know, they have a different idea of who white people are, or they're into free market economics in particular is one of the big clashes with Nazism, because the National Socialists had a strong government intervention in the economy. Then outside of this, there's a larger pool of people we sometimes call right-wing populists. You know, Donald Trump would fall into this, Pat Buchanan, other people. Usually they have these bigoted views. They usually code their racism in some kind of way. They'll code their anti-Semitism. They're pretty open about their Islamophobia and homophobia. And then the alt-right is like a particular style that falls within this. And one foot is in the right-wing populist camp, and one foot is in the white nationalist and particularly fascist camp, right? So people like Richard Spencer, you know, Mike Enoch are outright white nationalists, but then you have other people like Gavin McGinnis and the Proud Boys, Patriot Prayer, some of these other groups are these bigoted far-right characters, but they stop just short of open anti-Semitism and open white nationalism. That's why you get, so they share a lot of the same ideas, they share a lot of the same worldview, but you can be Jewish and join the groups, you can be a gay man and join most of the groups, and you can be a person of color and join the groups. But they'll both share many of the same things. They just won't go as far as some of the white nationalists will.
Yeah, yeah, I think, and I think they bank on that of seeming as this cohesive group. Because one, it makes them scarier, it makes them this big movement, or it makes them appear to be this big movement. But also, like, for example, like Milo Yiannopoulos, you know, it's because he kind of fits in one faction, but not the other. But when you show them, it's like, well, yeah, he might be alt-right, but look, so we're not that bad. We've got a gay, Jewish, you know, pretty boy. So we can't be that bad, but really he doesn't even fit into all the other factions. So
yeah, but you'll find, I mean, I think they really got to get over this question of, they think it's a conflict of identities, and it's a question of political ideologies. And you'll find gay men and people of color in the neo-Nazi movement, sometimes who are out. And so it's, you know, you will find the less hardcore you get, the more diverse the population will be. You know, there's many people of color involved in the Christian right, you know, who are theocratic Christians who also share many views, you know, are homophobic or anti-democratic or anti-leftist. And, you know, you'll find quite a number of people of color involved in this.
Yeah. it's true that in any demographic, there's people that are fighting against their own benefit, against their own good, which you could say for the plethora of the political, the majority of the political spectrum you could say the same thing, actually. And one thing I can't remember if it was in one of the actual bullets of the actual ways to fight fascists, or if it was on the forward, but you talked about that the alt-right or fascists in general are not afraid to use violence so to achieve their goals. So that's what kind of why anti-fascist groups and activists have kind of had to rise to meet it. It's not that we or the anti-fascists or the left likes violence.
Yeah, it's very reactive. I mean, like anti-fascist and counter far-right organizing is very reactive, and it is reacting to how violent these groups are. This is what we've seen a big explosion of. Even the groups that aren't full white nationalists have become very violent. We see this with the Proud Boys. We're seeing this with the militias that have now, once again flooded the U.S. with paramilitary units like we saw in the 90s. You can't just have a regular political battle that you would have with Republicans, where you debate them and you try to organize, organize people, and your groups have maybe rallies and counter rallies with them, where people aren't hurting each other. Because the far right uses violence so much, they use it both as a organizing tool. They recruit people to their side with the violence. They use violence against you. They use it to win their political battles, and then their ultimate political vision is based on violence. Like they're going to have to use mass violence to carry out their political goals, even aside from their direct organizing right now. But it's a direct organizing right now that is the reason that you have to use all of the tactics available to you. And of course, you should use all of the legal tactics available to you, even the unusual ones, to help shut these groups down. And you have to do that because law enforcement's not going to do this. If law enforcement does crack down, it'll be a year or two later. And then who knows whether they will or not. Sometimes they're integrated with these groups, especially the more moderate ones like Proud Boys and militias. And you're going to have to use a much expanded toolkit of aggressive actions to help contain these groups, or they're going to run through your community. They're not going to be shy about using violence. They glorify violence. We see this with the t-shirts like Right Wing Death Squad and the whole helicopter thing, and praise of Pinochet, who had killed leftists during his regime in Latin America. So like they love violence, and you're going to have to be prepared for that. And that's one reason like this is such a kind of edgy kind of organizing, unfortunately, because we need to protect our communities from these groups.
Yeah. I think, can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I just clicked something and I was worried it silenced everything. Okay, no, we're fine. Yeah, absolutely. And even you just said that like the violence is reactive, and I think that's a very good point. But on the flip side, you have a whole section that's specifically dedicated to being proactive. So the being reactive to the violence. We didn't start the fire. We didn't start the violence. Is Billy Joel an anti-fascist? Do your homework. Get back to me. Can you talk a little about what activists can do to be proactive? And I want to mention again to everyone that these are completely legal tactics. Spencer's gone through a lot of work to find specifically ones that you can do right now. You don't have to worry about any legal backlash. Not saying that you won't find backlash anyways, but less likely. But yeah, could you talk a little bit about the proactive measures people can take?
Yeah, I mean, the movement is kind of reactive in general. Like it reacts to the presence of far right groups, but on the broad scale, it's reactive. But on the smaller scale, you should do proactive things. These things will help you have a stronger movement for when there are far-right actions, and it will make it more difficult for far-right groups to come into your community if they haven't already come or they haven't had big public recruiting drives. So like one of the things I suggest people, this is done a lot more in Europe, is to build educational programs. I think your channel's great and other kinds of things are great, but you can also do things in person. Like we talked about book clubs before, or talks. Like if you want to get people in your community, I feel specifically in your geographic community, it's more important to do stuff in real life, or you have to target the digital stuff more narrowly and specifically. So we encourage people to teach others, not just yourself, because you may have a knowledge base, but share with others your knowledge about the far right, how it works, and kinds of things that people do. I give talks to different kinds of groups a lot of the time, just real basic 101 talks about, usually it's about what the far right looks like and what the organizing is going on in their area, because most people are not aware of this, aware of the details, even if they do have active, even neo-Nazi organizing in their area. Another favorite thing of mine is to hold memorial events. Most places in the U.S. have probably had places where Nazis have, and other white nationalists have killed people. They're the sites of various atrocities over the last 100 years, massacres of Native Americans, lynchings. I grew up in this little town in the South. I was never taught there was a lynching in the town square, in 1911, till I Googled it recently. Don't Google the town I grew up in lynching. It's a very graphic picture. A lot of places have these, especially you live in a community that's mostly white. That community has a history of white nationalist violence. There's a reason it's mostly white. It didn't just happen by chance. Whether that's like my mother was like, who has terrible racial politics. Hopefully my mom's not listening to this. Was like, well, I just grew up, there were no black people where I grew up. It was an all white community. I'm like, yeah, that's because there were like racist housing covenants where you grew up. And sure enough, I Googled it and there were racist housing covenants in that town. I mean, it wasn't for her. It was just her experience. It looked neutral, but we see how history and all these forces form these experiences that we have. So hold memorial events, and this is a proactive thing. It reminds people of the racialized violence that's happened in their community in the past to make it that present. And hopefully when fascists come in with these soft talking points like, oh, immigration, hurts wages, or like, why are, people want special advantages or stuff, like people understand what the ultimate outcome of these politics are. And because the ultimate outcome of far right politics is violence, and it's violence against other people in your community. Another thing you can do ahead of time, and this is in preparation, is recruit folks who you'll need. You'll need people who have special skills. You'll need people to run security. This can be a big problem if people with concealed carry permits, people who know how to do security. I mean, it's a bit of a skill because you don't want to ideally not get in a big scuffle or a fight with somebody. We ended up hiring a bunch of bouncers. We found a bunch of bouncers in the bars who were happy to do security. It's what they did for work, and this could be their activism, was to do security at our events. If people are going to have firearms or whatever, find who's got a concealed carry, find who wants to do this. You want to find lawyers. You want to have lawyers arranged, because if there's far right organizing, there's going to be violence. That's going to mean that they're going to either beat people up or you're going to have to use self-defense, and this can create legal problems. Find tech people. There's always, 100 platforms to do stuff with. Find medics, find people who know first aid. Again, if there's far right organizing, people are going to get hurt. So go find people that you'll need ahead of time, because it's really hard when you have an emergency to scramble and be like, who's got a lawyer? Oh no, someone's hurt. Who knows first aid? We're doing an event. It's been threatened. This always happens to us. We need security. You're already, you're already doing promotion and the event handling and everything. Like, if you don't have somebody on call to do security, it's just like another thing to do. So line all these people up in advance. It's one of the things you can do to be proactive.
Yeah, and I think also, so you were mentioning it in I lost my word. You are mentioning it in a stance of like, if you're organizing to get all these people, but I think that's a very good point, that a lot of people that maybe are not good at organizational, don't have organizational skills, can be these other support roles. You don't have to go out and start, throwing punches. You don't have to be the person getting everything together. As a matter of fact, you only need a few people doing that. You need much more people doing the support work, the bouncing, the medics, the bringing refreshments. Those are all anti-fascist actions.
Yeah, get a list of people who are sympathizers and can't commit full time to this work, but are willing to plug in once in a while. I mean, I know a bunch of people, and I'm like, sometimes I just need one thing. Like, can you do this thing for an hour or two? And people are happy. A lot of people want to give something, but they have full time jobs or families or whatever. They just don't have that much brain span to follow this stuff every day. But they're happy to go. They want to participate in some way, and they're happy to go do one thing for you, and that'll be very important for you.
Yeah. And also, I want to encourage, if the chat has any questions, I will read them out to ask Spencer, of course, barring that it's within taste. But if you have any well, it doesn't have to be good taste. It just has to be polite and not fashy. But you can be disgusting if that's
fashy,
your thing.
No fashy comments. Yeah.
No fashy.
The block button is your friend.
Yeah, well, we've got a couple of moderators in the chat that I got trust in you. I don't know.
It took me a while on Twitter to learn like block and mute, and then just do it like a video game. Block, mute, block.
It's basically it's like Gattaca. You gotta
yeah. I'm like one chance and you're out. Maybe sometimes people are just being a little assy and they're sympathizers, but too bad.
Yeah. Well, I think like I don't have time, even if like I think maybe they are, unless it's like someone that I'm interested in actually talking to in the future or something like that. I don't need you in my life. Get out. And I recommend that for everybody. You don't have time for that kind of stuff. Go do work. Go do non-drama related stuff for your own mental health.
Yeah, there's too much drama on the internet. Try to avoid it. What if you have no social network at all, no context? Well, you can do this work yourself, and you will attract people. You become gravity. You can become gravity. It takes a lot more work. If you start tracking fascists in your area and then release the information, start a blog, anonymously, especially if you're only working by yourself, remain anonymous. If you come up with information and release it and then share it, people will come to you because they'll want to know. Or you can then go to people and be like, hey, we produced this report or this intel. You can go to organized groups and be like, can I talk to your group about it and present stuff if you're that kind of a person? You can write letters to prisoners. If you don't want to do research in your area, I mean, there's other things in the guide that you can do. One of the big things is prisoner support. Write letters to prisoners. It actually, if people are arrested, try to do fundraisers. You can do online fundraisers. You can make merchandise and sell it, and give the proceeds, because we need to raise a lot of money. All political movements need money. People get arrested and they need money. People go to jail and they need money. People don't think about how much money prisoners need. They can cost $10,000 a year. If you want to give them commissary and books, buy them, magazine subscriptions, pay for help their families come and visit them. Often prisoners are very far from their families. When people are arrested, even if they're not convicted, lawyers are extremely expensive. Even if the lawyers are pro bono, they have expenses, like there's charges, even if their own labor is free, that they need to be compensated for. And so, you can do fundraising is another thing you can do. So
absolutely.
There's other things in the guide too. You take a look through it and pick out the things that you, it's another thing in the guide. There's something in there for everybody, even people who are disabled, who don't want to leave their home, have different identities, and they're want to be very cautious about being outed, or they feel like they'll be targeted. There's everybody can't do everything. I mean, some people can do everything. Everybody won't do everything, but there's things for everybody in there that you can pick and see what calls to you, what you're most comfortable doing, and do those things. There's a lot of things you can do from the comfort of your own home that you don't need to do with others.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you want to keep up with a lot of that, I just pasted in the chat the International Antifa International Defense Fund, which you can find out about what's been going on around the world, not just USA, about anti-fascist activists who need help, prisoners that you can write to, things like that. You can keep up to date, or you can actually donate to them and become an active member of the Decisions crew if you donate over $20. So yeah, donations are praxis for sure.
Yeah, if you donate to them, and then you'll get on a list in which they vote on each person who applies for funds, and this is actually an interesting way to keep up with what is going on, because where there are areas where there's a lot of activism, people will get in trouble, and you'll be able to see where the hot spots are, and this is around the world.
And also so I didn't link directly to the fundraisers. I've linked directly to their general WordPress, I think. Yeah, WordPress. That has, not only does it have the links to donate to, but also even more than just the ones that come into, because I'm also on the Decisions crew, that come in for decision making. There's also more posts just on general activism on the site. And there's also they're in partnership with Antifa International, which is also a site you can check out.
Yeah. If you don't have any social contacts, something you can do that in the guide, go around if there's far right propaganda in your community, stickers and flyers, take them down, and also replace them with anti-racist and anti-bigoted messaging, or just proactively put up that kind of messaging around your community. Definitely something you can do by yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I should have gotten them. I'm sorry. I have a stack of stickers that I got from Antifa International. I'm going to find a way to give those out to people. I'll get back to you. Let me think about that, chat, and I'll get back to a way to get those out to people. Because propaganda is good if it's our propaganda, of course. So don't get the idea that propaganda is inherently a bad thing. You know, that's the word has gotten this connotation. It just means politically motivated advertising. Yeah. Advertise about Antifa. Advertise about stopping fascism in any way, and activism anyway. And yeah, take down any fascism stuff, any fascist propaganda you do see. And the fourth section is counter demonstrate. Mm-hmm. So you touched a little bit about that earlier, but that's kind of where that's what gets in the news, right? That's what people hear about more, specifically the violent ones. But what other kind of counter demonstrations are there that aren't necessarily, a lot of people get put off or get worried because they're not into violence themselves. They don't, feel comfortable with that. So what would you tell those people that for different ways to actually go out, like at a rally, but not get involved with violence?
Well, there's only a few rallies where violence, actual like fisticuffs break out. Most of those are in Portland, Oregon, and most of the other examples for the last few years, really since 2018, there's actually been a change of what's happening where these conflicts are happening. It used to be the far right would call a rally and there'd be a counter demonstration, and that's where almost all the clashes would happen. Now they're around Black Lives Matter rallies. So Black Lives Matter often targeting the police, and then the far right is targeting the Black Lives Matter demonstrations. And of course, anti-fascists and others are present in the Black Lives Matter demonstrations, or becoming more present as they get attacked. So, decide, the guide was sort of written before this, this is a revised thing. If you're going to have a counter demonstration, figure out right now if you really want to do that, or if it's better not to have anything. I mean, it's a bit of a thing. If somebody does call it, you need people to show up. There's nothing worse than just having a few people and being outnumbered. That's very bad, and that's very dangerous. If you're going to have one, you want to have as many numbers as you can. But you may not wish to have one right now. It may be better just to have their event sink into silence. I mean, I think we've shown we can counter-organize people. Anyway, if you do have one, it's actually an interesting time. This is definitely something you can't do by yourself. You have to do with other people. It's an interesting time for people to be involved who don't want to get in the streets, because there's most of what goes into organizing a demonstration does not have to do with the demonstration itself. So first off, if there is some kind of clash between groups, you don't have to be at the demonstration. You can, this usually only involves a tiny percentage of the people. You can simply stand in back or stand away. This stuff is often a little more, I don't want to say, politically motivated, but it's a little more, 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 almost scripted than it seems. Like sometimes people will actually sort of step forward to fight with each other. Usually we have a lot more people, and you can just stand. If you just like keep an eye out of what's going on, you can just stand in another part of it. Like most people are not involved in the fighting at demonstrations. I was at Charlottesville. I think most people on our side were not involved in any of the fighting. It was really 10 or 20%. So it was a really chaotic day, but it was a fairly small number of people who got, and they almost like stepped forward to have these fights. The other thing is just help with the rest of the demonstration. It's tons of work to organize beforehand. You can help make banners. You can help do the, craft the call out. You can help publicize it. You can help set up housing. You can house people. You can be a medic on site if you have medic things. You can do legal work. You can do comms work. And then afterwards, there's always work afterwards, especially if there's been arrests. You can fundraise for them. You can parlay with the lawyers. You can help the person itself. It's very stressful to have charges against them, and people usually need help just personally. Sometimes organizers will get threatened after the demonstrations by the far right, and you can provide support to them. So this is actually a time where there's a lot of work to do that doesn't involve being in the streets at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm so sorry, everyone.
You can be the one right talking. You can be the one talking to the tanky organization because they annoy everyone else too much, but you still want them to show up. Take one for the team.
Someone slipped something in my drink, and you gotta. The fashion finally got me all the way in Taiwan. Everyone, sorry.
The CCP heard us talking about tankies, and they sent
that's what it is.
A throat ray over.
All right, maybe I'm back. Let's hope so. That threw me off. Sorry. Absolutely, and I think it's important to so many people, and I think this is purposely done by mainstream media, but especially the right-wing media of centering around the violence to make it seem like not only to kind of smear the name, but also to make a lot of people who would want to join in and want to get active very shy about it, because a lot of people. I'm the name of this channel is Soft Boy. I'm not a violent guy myself, so a lot of people that want to get active say, well, I'm not a violent guy. I don't do violence, so I guess I'll just stay at home and do nothing. And that's intentional. So it's I'm very happy to see stuff like this zine come out to show that there's so much other stuff, legal stuff that you can do. One thing I do want to ask about, and this is definitely not an attack, but I want you to elaborate a little bit. So you talk about deplatforming, and I agree with this, by the way, deplatforming on social media and online payment platforms like Venmo and such, the alt-right. I've done it before myself, and I think it's good, but does this also open up opportunities for deplatforming the left even more? There was the famously the Facebook kind of deplatforming of Crime Think and It's Going Down, and a few other a lot of other leftist media organizations, anarchist organizations. So what do you think about that? If we make that a tactic, does that just kind of open up more attack against us as well?
Well, so let's talk practically and not philosophically. Very few left-wing platforms accounts have been deplatformed. Many far right ones have. The deplatforming, we have to push it. So let me see how to say this. Most platforms have, this isn't a legal thing. This is pushing a company to do stuff. Most companies have terms of service, and Nazis and the alt-right and everything have been able to use. Deplatforming is basically telling companies to enforce their existing terms of service. Mm-hmm. They should never have allowed these accounts on their platform in the first place. So we're holding companies to their own internal rules is basically what deplatforming is. Right? We're not forcing anybody to do anything. Will it blow back on anti-fascist and anarchist groups? My opinion is that in an attempt to seem even-handed, because conservatives keep yelling that there's a bias against conservatives in this thing, which I think is ridiculous. I mean, you have to be pretty bad to get thrown off these platforms, and usually they do it long after the problem has clearly been there. I mean, I think Richard Spencer is still on Twitter. David Duke just got thrown off like a year ago or in the last year. I mean, it was absurd. I think they throw a few people on the left under the bus just to look even-handed. And that's my opinion about what's really going on. And in practice, very few left-wing or anti-fascist accounts get deplatformed. It has happened, but most of what we do is legal and is truthful, and most of what they do is hateful. It's bigoted. It violates terms of service, and it promotes violence. So there's a reason they're being deplatformed, and we're not in general. I mean, like, there's a real reason. Anti-fascist accounts don't direct hatred towards groups of people, historically oppressed people. That's one of the main reasons you get thrown off of Twitter for, right? Or on Facebook. Like, they do it and we don't.
Yeah. I would give a word of caution to the audience, though, that don't rely on that. We've all probably known plenty of people on Twitter who've gotten banned for being completely within the guidelines. And we've also known plenty of fash who don't get banned for violating the guidelines. So, don't hold that as the gold standard. Don't hold that as a physical law that will never be broken.
Yeah, their rules are always fluctuating. They don't announce what they are. So, and then sometimes you're a sacrifice. I mean, I think it's going down, and crime think we're thrown off as sacrifices to look even-handed. It had very little to do with who they are, what they're doing. So yeah, you don't know. I advise people not to push it. Sometimes people feel more free with the anonymity of social media, but especially if you've built up a follower count, play a little. It's my recommendation, it's probably better for you to play a little back and keep the resources that you've built up. It takes a long time to build up decent, platforms. So and they can just pull them.
Yeah, I'm still trying to make that happen myself.
Yeah.
And I guess the other side of that would be that if we never try to deplatform or talk about fash, they're still gonna the platforms are still gonna kick off leftist creators and leftist organizations, because like the big Facebook purge was not because of those groups calling out fascists. It was because Donald Trump and the media started talking about anarchists and violent anarchists. So it wouldn't have made a difference either way, as far as what we were doing to deplatform or call out. So might as well do it if they're gonna take you down anyways.
The deplatforming has been the best tool to use against them. Honestly, it's helped shut down the alt-right. Like, their ability to use social media and use the fundraising tools, as well as some of the discussion platforms like Discus. When they lost all they didn't all lose them, but when they lost their main ones, it really stunted their growth and stunted their organizing. It's driven Richard Spencer crazy. Their inability to fundraise on these platforms, like, they can't open a PO box and have people send them a check. It just seems to be impossible for them. It's really, really hurt their movement. So it's been effective.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another. I mean, I guess that's kind of proof of non-physical or non in the streets activism that really does work. Kind of proof in the pudding there.
And you can do it from there's no exposure. You can do it from your home. Don't need to know anybody else. Don't need to work with others. So
Could you talk a little bit, because they worked with you to produce this or to promote to disseminate it, I guess. Could you talk a little bit about PopMob and what they're doing?
Sure. PopMob is a popular mobilization. They're based in Portland, Oregon. They are one of the groups that help call and turn people out to the big demonstrations there against the Proud Boys and Patriot Prayer and the other far-right groups. They they say that they're everyday anti-fascists. Their goal is to spread anti-fascism out of the sort of existing core circles and get other people to identify with the movement, who again are not interested in using violence per se, in violence or illegal activities or anything. They try to have more playful kind of actions at the demonstrations and do more like public educational community work. They had been distributing the guide. I knew they had been distributing the guide, and I wanted to do an updated version, so I contacted them to work with them, and they helped edit this. We actually spent a number of months editing this, and they added some things and changed some things to reflect their own experience in Portland with this. And they added, I mean, I wrote the guide to deal with white nationalists. I thought some of these things were very specific towards them and not so useful for other groups, but they were like, no, we've used these tactics against other groups, generally who use violence themselves, like the Proud Boys, like they're effective. So it was interesting. Like I learned that you could have the use was expanded beyond what I had originally intended it to be for.
Yeah, and I love their website. I'll put that in the chat here. Oops, I'm on the wrong thing. Yeah, I'll put that in the chat there. And if you, it's got a very thorough list of resources that I think people can check out, including 40 Ways to Fight Nazis by Spencer Sunshine, right at the top. But yeah, ice resistance, staying safe at protests, a lot of good stuff here. So there are videos, articles, and books. There was.
Oh, that's the link to the original version. That's funny.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you can definitely find the original one at.
The original one was called 40 Ways to Fight Nazis. They actually recommend we change it to 40 Ways to Fight Fascists. The real title was supposed to be 40 Ways to Fight Nazis Without Punching Them, which I thought was quite clever. But
is this? Yeah, that goes to the.
That's the original one.
Okay.
The Surge put that one out, the Showing Up for Racial Justice, in 2018. We did it for the first anniversary of Charlottesville.
Okay. And yeah, they do. It's much more of a kind of a fun, more public accessible atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
With
so
a lot
more
of
light. There's more colors involved than just black.
Here we go. This is what I was looking for right here. This love the unicorns.
Yeah, I think they did a banana block one time.
Although if it ever did happen where they had to do some like black block work, I guess colorful block here, I would love a video of a unicorn punching a Nazi. I'm not gonna lie, that would be beautiful.
The unicorn doesn't punch the Nazi. The unicorn impales the Nazi.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Or the
unicorn. That was in my next guide: 40 unicorn tactics against Nazis.
Video froze. Is the video froze for everyone else? Okay, I'm sorry, VGamer11. I think it might be just on your end. I think we're pretty good here. Sorry, if you refresh, sometimes you have to go back like 30 seconds to get a buffer, and it'll be fine. So we're probably about done here, but I do want to share one more thing. I'm still sharing screen. No, I'm not. Where do I get that at? There we go. This quite amazing video.
This is
I'm
wonderful.
going to skip through a lot of it. I'm not going to play all of
it.
Yeah,
about 3 minutes it starts.
Yeah. This is an illustrated reading of 40 Ways to Fight Fascists by Spencer Sunshine. And this is I didn't know this song actually before. Okay. I'm going to be honest.
It was early new wave, Heaven 17.
I'll
Do you have sound for it?
Oh, is it not playing the sound?
No, I don't hear it.
Is it? Well,
do you hear the sound?
Folks, do you hear the sound? No, you're not. Usually StreamYard plays it. Oops. Oops. Oh, I'm sorry, folks.
Can you just literally play it out of your speakers and it could be picked up by the mic?
I could do that. It usually, I don't know why it's not letting me. Let me look real quick.
So I woke up one day and someone had tagged me and they had made this video for a New Orleans drag festival. Like, I didn't know the person. A bunch of people have read the guide and picked it up and run with it. It's being translated into a few languages. Someone made a flyer you could put up on phone poles. It had the little, you can tear the tags at the bottom with the phone numbers, and it had the URL for it. So all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, it's a work of art. I love this. And it goes through very quickly all the different steps you can do. I usually, because I'm going through Streamlabs right now, I'm using OBS just for the video. I am not sure what's causing it to not. Usually it shares the audio too. So I will put it in the chat. You can open it yourself. I was going to play a couple minutes of you. Now you just have to do it yourself and give them your views, which they definitely deserve, and give them your likes. They only have 43 subscribers. I think you can fix that, folks, to push that up, because they deserve
You're also
it.
welcome to subscribe to my channel, where there are long, boring videos.
I have videos. I just don't have long ones. I have boring videos. I just don't have long ones. I will put the... Where did I put it? You put it in private chat. I forgot about that. I will put your YouTube in the chat as well. People, go subscribe to Spencer Sunshine and watch some long, boring, I bet they're not boring videos. But I think, unless there's anything else you want to talk about, we've covered a good bit of what's going on in your book, and I hope everyone out there has a lot of new ideas, or if maybe ideas you've already heard of, that a lot of more inspiration to go do them, of ways that you don't have to risk legal action against you, and you can still fight fascists.
Yeah, I'd just like to encourage everybody to get out and get active. I mean, if you're listening to this, you're probably interested in some of these ideas about anarchism and other libertarian socialist ideas. There's a lot of stuff you can do. You can do stuff by yourself. You can do stuff with other people. It's a really scary time, and we do need more people doing this work, especially, the far right is really mobilized right now. They're going to be mobilized through the election, and, quite possibly after the election, win or lose. And I think the next couple of months are real crucial. So now would be a good time to get your feet wet and get involved.
Absolutely. Spencer Sunshine also has a Patreon that you can support his good work and make sure, because again, this zine is absolutely free. He is not charging you for it, so he doesn't get anything from it directly, I'm assuming. Yeah. So please go support him. Support Spencer Sunshine. Support Softboy Social Club. Also on Patreon. Go check out his work on spencersunshine.com, and the PDF as well are all in the description of the YouTube video vlog that you'll see if you're not watching it live. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Spencer, and yeah, everyone, go out there and use these tactics. Use other tactics if you're comfortable with that. I'm not telling you not to. I'm definitely not telling you to. Lord YouTube, please don't kick me off.
Terms of service.
Yeah, exactly. And thanks everyone. Yeah, go stay active and stay safe. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Brett Beard, for having me on the show.
Thanks for coming.